Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 298. Today, last week, I wander up to Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking, where Mike Pekovich was teaching a class with Bob, of course. And we decided to record a podcast in the big room. It's at the end of a long day. They are in rare form, and it's a wonderful episode filled with lots of deep woodworking topics and knowledge, and we have a good time. I think you're really going to enjoy the episode. Before we get started, again, I get a weird email from Sarah in marketing. Today, she tells me that a shrimp's heart is in its head. Didn't know that. But she also wanted me to let you know about a new thing we're doing on finewoodworking.com. We're doing journeys, if you will. It's like a class or a guided journey of woodworking topics. And the first one that we're doing is Woodworking Fundamentals. This is a great 12-week guided tour of woodworking topics, articles, videos, hosted by Mike Pekovich and Amanda Russell. And we're really excited about it. So for $20, you get a 12-week full membership as an unlimited member of finewoodworking.com. And once a week, you will get an email with a video introduction from Mike or Amanda, sharing their favorite articles and videos for a beginner on that given week's topic. There's so much information out there on the internet. There's so much information out there on fine woodworking alone. It can be overwhelming. Mike and Amanda did a great job curating all of the content for this, and we're really excited to bring this to the audience and to help get more woodworkers into woodworking, a craft we all know and love. Head on over to finewoodworking.com/fundamentals and check out the journey. I think it's a really exciting and cool and important thing, and we're really glad to be doing this. finewoodworking.com/fundamentals. All right, on with the show. We have a small audience.
Yep.
We do. They're all behind me. Sneaking up they're making faces at me.
They're making gestures at you. What the hell's that about?
So for those not watching on YouTube, we are at CT Valley, Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking.
Yeah.
You don't call it CT Valley, do you?
I've never called it CT Valley.
I don't know why I always do that.
CVSW or Connecticut Valley.
CVSW.
Yeah.
Okay.
Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What are y'all doing here?
We are just finished up day 4 of 6 on a small travel tool chest class.
Okay.
Super cool. We got some glue ups done today. They're starting to look like tool chests. And we're right on schedule.
Are you?
No.
Oh.
We're close.
We're doing good.
I mean, we changed around a couple, the sequence on a couple things. But
Yeah.
I think we're in good shape.
I think people don't realize that when you teach a class, you've got it, especially you too. I know you have it worked out. Like at this point, I want to be here. At this point, I want to be there. Right?
It's all, I was telling Mike and I were talking about it the other day, and it's all logistics. Any project class is logistics, just figuring out what has to happen first, second, third. And if you don't do this, then this is going to come and smack you tomorrow, and that kind of thing. So, and sometimes you can figure it out in advance, and sometimes you go, oh, didn't see that coming. Yeah.
Is that why the first class is always like absolutely nerve-wracking, Mike?
Your first time you teach a class is, yes, you don't know. Hey, how are we doing this week, Mike? I don't know.
Yeah. But sometimes the first class is actually, in a way, better because we're all figuring it out, and so it's more realistic.
Yeah.
And it's, like by the 4th or 5th time, we figured out every way to screw it up. And so we've taken, everything we can do to not have that happen. So it's actually good to get in the first or second time around.
It's a little more organic, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why the woodworking one that we did did that jewelry box for 20 years. And I had to stop. I couldn't do it anymore. I knew that it was the third night of the class, and it was 7:30, which means that we were 20 minutes behind. You know? And I was like, no, I can't do this anymore.
How many times have you done this class, Mike?
I think only maybe the second time of this size. This is a smaller of the two travel chests I do.
Oh, yeah.
I had my bigger one was my travel chest for when I drive. And then when I started flying, I needed something smaller. So that's what we're making. So this is really cool. The first one was sort of like, what am I going to possibly need on a 10-day trip across the country? And now this is more like, okay, what are the essential tools I need to teach? And so instead of 3 hand planes, it's 1 hand plane. But I like it. I live out of this tool chest in my own shop because it just has everything I need. All the other stuff is in my big wall cabinet. So, and this is small enough to where you can actually carry it, put it on the end of your bench where the bigger one is on a rolling stand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this class a lot.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, we've done the big one. I bet you we've done that 5 or 6 times.
Right.
Yeah. I'm doing one for myself this time
You're
around.
making a tool chest?
Yeah. I borrowed.
Are you being a good student? Are you attentive?
No.
And,
trying to be
yeah.
No, he's going ahead and doing things different.
Oh.
one or two.
So you've turned into that guy.
1 or 2 times. Yeah.
Okay.
I've done that. I was like, okay, I gotta not do that. Because I know where I'd be at if someone was doing that to me.
Okay.
But
No
it's a
tension
nice
here.
size. I borrowed Mike's travel tool chest last November. I did that thing for the State Department or for the Defense Department.
Right.
And it was great. I was away for 2 weeks and it was perfect.
Cool.
Yeah. So,
Right on. All right, let's answer some questions.
but before we do that,
No.
but before
Now
we
he's
do
doing
that,
it to me, Mike.
the new website, we have to hit the new website in the open house.
Is the new website.
The new school
Is
website
live.
is completely, it's been going since July 3rd. And we got into the 90s, and you can now sign up online, and you can do the whole thing, and it's just worked out
Got a
fantastically.
sweet visitor counter at the bottom of the page, and it's Netscape friendly.
I
And
don't think we've done that yet.
It's got the American flag waving.
Yeah. There's a whole gallery that still has to happen. And the other thing is, and also new,
what is this?
this is a sample of the pencils that are coming.
I don't want any part of this. I want red pencils.
They're coming.
That's it.
That's the sample of the lead. The red pencils are coming on. The open house
Okay.
is September 8th or September 9th. The red pencils should be here September 8th.
Wait, is it really going to be a Musgrave?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't know Musgrave was Shelbyville. Again, this turns into a pencil podcast.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I haven't listened to any podcasts in a while, so I didn't know
Ever.
that. I didn't know I have, but I didn't know they had degraded into that, degenerated into
I
that.
didn't know that Musgrave was in Shelbyville, Tennessee, former home of Paramedic.
Yeah, no, they were in a different town.
Oh, Smyrna.
Something, yeah.
Smyrna.
But yeah. So I'm really pleased because I got a harder lead than is standard. I got 2H lead, and because of that, I had to buy 10 gross of pencils. So it was one of those, okay, we better like these.
I'll be expecting a few. And some more pads, please.
Yeah, they're on their way.
All right, so new website, and your open house is?
The open house, the 22nd annual open house is coming up Saturday, September 9th.
Okay.
And all sorts of good stuff going on. Probably, well, I think I got 6 different antique tool dealers, 25 tables set up outside, and then I have a whole bunch of people demonstrating and just talking and having a good time. And I didn't tell you, Tom McLaughlin is going to come. He let me know yesterday. But Al what's it called? Al Breed might be here. Andrew Hunter, Chuck Bender, Mike, myself,
Bunch of nobodies.
a bunch of basic losers.
Yeah.
Matt Cianci.
Cool.
Yeah, it's one of the best used tool little flea markets, and I kind of want to tell people, and it's just like, no, I really don't want people to know about it.
So last year, I got the phone call from Josh Clark.
Yeah.
The night before. Hey, man, what do you need me to bring?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I need this. And I hang up the phone. My wife goes, who is that? It's my tool dealer. She's like, you have a dealer? He's like, but he knows I'm going to see you. You need something. I'll bring it.
Yeah.
So
he emailed me the other day. He's hoping that he can make it.
Yeah.
His kid is college trips and all that sort of thing. So
poor thing.
Yeah.
Last year I found just a sweet little distant backsaw dovetails. I picked it up. I said, I'll be right back. I went inside to Matt Cianci, who's a saw sharpener. Said, Matt, should I buy this? He goes, yeah. Does it need to be sharpened? He said, yeah. So I went and paid for it, gave it to Matt directly, and then it showed up at my house about 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
So
that's service.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And I bought my usual, I've never seen those clamps before. Cool.
Yeah.
The ones on the drill press there, those big. That's from last year. So
you can't pass up a clamp you don't have.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So this question is from Robin. I was listening to old episodes, and Bob Van Dyke mentioned using glue to help align a box hinge. Was a 5-minute epoxy or hot melt glue? I thought it was epoxy, but then how would you remove the hinge? Any help is appreciated, as is your fantastic podcast. So just to clear things up, I'm pretty sure you did not say this. I'm pretty sure Mike said, I saw Bob do this the other day.
Yes, but I wasn't quite sure what you did.
I was wondering. I was like, did I do a video on this? Because there's so many times when I have no recollection of doing videos, and I'll say something. Hey Ben, we got to do a video on sharpening. Yeah, you did that. We did last
10.
fall.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, because you do some super clean boxes. Your dovetails aren't sticking out all over the place.
Yeah.
So the lid needs to line up to the body super
Perfectly.
Clean and accurate.
Yeah. And the technique that I learned from Will Neptune, and he learned it from Harold Ianson. He was the first Sappham Cartouche Award recipient, and he was amazing. But this technique involved basically you set your hinge on the case first, like you would normally. And then the tricky part is, let's say you're putting a top on it, and if that gets skewed a little bit, then you're screwed because the top doesn't line up. So what you're doing is you are setting your hinge on in the base or in the carcass, and then you put a little piece of foam before you close the hinge up. You put a little piece of foam, 1/8-inch thick foam, on it, and then close it up. And what that foam is going to do is when you put your top on it, it pushes the top leaf against the
like a
top.
spring.
So, it's putting a little pressure on it. So you take a couple of drops of 5-minute epoxy. Like just a little, you sand the hinge a little bit, the backside just a little bit to give it some tooth, and then like 2 or 3 little dabs of 5-minute epoxy. Set the top in there so it's exactly where you want it to be, and then let it dry. 5-minute epoxy. So 5-10 minutes, you're good. And then you can open it up really carefully, okay, and scribe around the hinge that's glued in place. And then you can, at the same time, you put your screws in to the, you start your screws and put those screws in with, a shorter screw. And now you've got that started. Okay, so now when you take the screws out, It's still attached to. It's still glued. So how do you get the hinge off? Because you glued it to the top. So you take like the tip of an iron, clothes iron, or a anything that you can get, any way of heating the hinge, and a little bit of heat on the hinge. And I use that it's just I forget what it's called, but you can use a clothes iron, and you're just transferring heat to the hinge, and it gets hot, and it goes boink, and it just comes off.
And you've already got your screws in.
And you've scribed around the hinge. So all you have to do is excavate that hinge, and it drops down, and your holes are there already. So it can't go anywhere else.
You're like working backwards.
And it's so cool. It works. When Harold did those, he did those 10 Seymour commodes, crazy intricate pieces of furniture, all like highly, highly veneered, and all these drawers. And if they didn't close perfectly, it didn't work. And that's where he came up with this technique. And Will taught it to me. And it's not something you're going to do every day, but for something like this, where if your top goes funny like that, it's like, okay, now what do you do? So
Really?
Yeah, it's
really
cool.
Interesting.
I can send it to you if you want.
We should make a video.
We could do that. I'd forget about it, though.
Mike, you just go to the other extreme and don't use hinges most of the time.
No, when I do, I just epoxy them on and leave them. Call it
and
good.
just keep the foam stuck in
The
there.
screws are just for
Sure.
decoration.
Yeah.
Yeah, you cut them off.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Inset hinges are overrated.
Yeah, really.
Just add some inlay, fill that gap.
Well, Mike makes sure that he intentionally has everything at a different size, so that there's always a little reveal, a little step, so
Always
nothing has
an
to line up
offset.
perfectly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Live and
There's-
die by the offset.
There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Built-in forgiveness.
Yeah.
Harold was on the back cover with those pieces he was making.
Yeah.
I want to say 162, but I don't think that's right.
We're gonna check.
I know.
Yeah, that's right.
I will try and remember to add to the outro of the episode whether you were right or wrong.
Okay.
We'll see if I'm on.
No
on
problem.
the ball. So what the heck is a commode? 'Cause I know what I think it is.
It's not what you think it is.
It's not what you think. It's like a demi-lune shape
Cabinet.
cabinet. Yeah.
Floor standing with curves.
Yeah.
Does it have timbre doors on that?
That didn't have timbre doors, but it has doors that or drawers and doors that open up.
Okay.
Everything's curved, so it opens up like that, and then drawers that open. It's like some of the hardest stuff you can imagine. And go ahead and make it, but it's all like everything veneered, so everything has to line up perfectly, because in veneer it all has to line up perfectly. You can't grind it in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, I'm making one. Yeah, I'll make 10. So that's what he did. He made 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess he knew his market too.
Last I heard, I think his wife still has one or two of them left. Yeah.
All right.
He passed away years ago, but yeah.
And he was like one of the first teachers at North Bennett Street, right? Or
I don't know if he ever taught at North Bennett Street.
all right.
I don't-
I'm getting him mixed up with somebody else then.
Yeah,
all
Mr. Fullerton.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it. Because nobody speaks his first name. It's always Mr. Fullerton.
Yeah. Exactly.
Said with reverence
Uh-huh.
and a slight pause afterwards.
Yeah. And I always have a hard time remembering the name.
Mhm.
And I always have to remember, okay, brushes, Fuller brushes. That's what makes me remember his name.
Another little glimpse inside the mind of Bob Van Dyke.
Yeah, it's scary in there.
Yeah. All right. This question is from Tyler. I want to start steam bending, but I have only access to kiln-dried lumber. Ryan Boggs said in an article that he will use kiln-dried lumber if he has to, whereas Michael Fortune says he only uses air-dried lumber. I know Mike has done a bit of steam bending, and I wanted to know your preference or if it matters. And then the follow-up, which is a meaty follow-up, we'll say, how do you go about cutting joinery on bent parts? How do you go about getting reference points? Do you cut the joinery before bending? All right, so let's talk about air-dried versus kiln-dried.
Yeah, I mean, we have articles stating both. Yeah. Kiln-dried is fine. Other people, no, it's got to be air-dried. I think Peter Galbert wrote an article for us on steam bending kiln-dried stock. More recently, I think Lon Schleining wrote an article on it way back, but I thought Peter did something more recent.
I do know that he was one of the first that I had known that was soaking it for days on end beforehand, and he was bending white oak, kiln-dried white oak without any issues.
Right.
Yeah.
I've done both, but most recently I was steam bending kiln drying ash, and it was fine.
No issue. Were you soaking it?
No.
Really?
I was just steaming it a lot. Yeah. And it was pretty subtle curves. It wasn't super huge, but it was fine. And then something like that, it was like legs for a caisson stand, and the lower portions were curved and the upper portions were straight. So I did all of my joinery on the upper portions before I did the steam bending. Mm-hmm. And that was fine. But cutting joinery into parts that's already curved, that's like its own science. Michael Fortune did a great article on that for us because he does so many things from curved things. Like I would I'm just going to make a flat in this area and it's going to make my joinery super easy. And Michael's like, what's with the flat there? Like, deal with it. So Michael really likes those engineering challenges of, no, it's a curve and another piece is coming into that curved surface. How do I do that perfectly without making concessions to the joinery, which is going to affect that aesthetic look that he was going for? So I would check that out.
Yeah. So, Bob, you do a lot of steam bending here at the school with various classes.
Actually, we haven't done any steam bending, I'll bet you, in at least 10, 15 years.
What about
David
Diard's here?
Dave Diard, we've done some with him. And that is usually green wood. Okay. But like Mike said, I mean, it doesn't have to be. It's easier. And I haven't done much steam bending personally, a little bit, but not. I think the biggest thing is if it's ribbon stock, your success rate goes way up.
Right.
So, and I've never done any pre-soaking.
No,
that would make sense though.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, one element to Michael Fortune's answer is he has a sawmill in his backyard, and he has a stash of air dried wood. And if you had air dried wood, it might be best, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't keep you from.
That's the thing. Is a lot of woodworkers, a lot of our readers, just don't. It's super hard to have access to green wood if you're living in Arizona. Jeff, you have any access to green lumber in Arizona? Not much. Okay.
But even I have had very little air dried. I finally have some air dried walnut that one of my students, friend of mine, gave me a couple months ago. But I've had very, very little over the years, and it's, I'm in Connecticut. It should be easy.
Yeah.
But, it's the same thing though. My lumber sourcing usually is with a telephone.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Okay. So curved joinery, one thing that I would add is the Dan Faya video workshop that we're doing right now. There's a lot of joinery on curved surfaces and everything like that. And just because of the finished piece is curved doesn't mean that it's necessarily curved when you're doing the joinery.
Right.
So a lot of times he's leaving a flat in place.
Yeah.
doing the joinery, then sculpting, so Tyler, check that out. There's a lot of methods of work that, he's, leaving this section in place until he does this, until he does that,
Because there's the other, like what I learned from Will, is basically a curved part, attaching it to something with reference, like reference edges. So putting it onto a piece of plywood that you can now use those reference edges. So you're attaching it to something and making it work that way. And that works really, really well. I learned that from Garrett years ago on the demi-lune that he was doing. Yeah. So that works too.
There's always a way.
Yeah, that's the way I've always done it.
Okay, so you're not steam bending much. What is your go-to method for curves? Are you sawing curves out, or are you bent laminating?
Bent laminations or brick laid or stack laminations. Okay. Like in period stuff is typically stack lamination or brick laid. And then you would be...
Is there a difference between stack lamination and bricklaying?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Kind of.
What is it?
Well, the bricks you can have smaller ones and then building up a curve. So you could be doing you could be like doing a whole demi-lune, and those could be made up of pieces that are maybe 12 or 13 inches long on a curve, cut on a curve, and then joined, and then you're stacking those up. Whereas I think of a stack lamination as more of a continuous, like four pieces cut to the same curve and then stacked on top of each other.
Okay.
And then you have to fair that curve and then veneer over it.
Okay, so the point of that would be because you're doing it on the face of a board, and you're not cutting that piece out of like a 16 quarter.
No, you're taking. Well, that's the thing, and like you can do it in pine.
Yeah,
and you can cut a piece of 4/4 pine, and you can cut your curves, stack them up, and glue them, stack them up, and now you've got an incredibly strong, stable substrate. I mean, you could, demi-lune, you could stand on it and it's not going to flex, and then veneer over it, and you're good. That's how a lot of the curves in period furniture were done.
Okay.
Yeah. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
So you're doing that William and Mary highboy, and around the bottom of the case, there's this kind of serpentine shape. And there's, what is it, almost like an 1/8 inch, 3/16 inch thick edging, which is curved to match that profile. How did you
that was gonna be my
well, let's save it.
Newest technique or whatever it's called.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Because that was cool. I mean, that's done a lot of like different stuff on that I've never done before.
All right. Good to know. All right.
Yeah.
Well, should we take a quick break?
Yeah.
Over 20 years ago, a couple of woodworkers decided to put together a woodworking club and share their passion about the period furniture they built, and the Society of American Period Furniture Makers was founded. Since that day, SAPFM has grown to an international group of woodworkers with 26 chapters in 3 countries, all sharing their love of building furniture. With a mission to provide the best in fine furniture making education, members have unlimited access to an extensive library of online resources, the annual conference, quarterly e-newsletters, and the annual journal publication. No matter where you are in your woodworking, there's something here for you. So join us today at sapfm.org, sapfm.org. The Society of American Period Furniture Makers. We are all furniture makers, period. Who wants to go first? All-time favorite something of all time?
Well, go ahead, Bob. I think that's a good transition.
Okay. So, what is it? All-time favorite
whatever
technique?
You want. Technique.
Anything. All right.
Sure.
Well, this William and Mary high chest that we're doing, No one can see it because it's a high podcast, but I held it up anyway. And it was a class that we've been doing with Chuck Bender. And Chuck has done a lot of William and Mary stuff. I've never done any. And this piece at the Wadsworth, just I fell in love with it. And so like last year, I was like, okay, we got to do this as a class. And the cool thing is on the skirt, the bottom there is cut out.
Into the microphone.
It's all cut out, and then it has basically like a cock beating, all, following. And it's just the coolest thing. And it's 1/8-inch thick walnut. And okay, so how do you make it follow all those curves?
Yeah, 1/8-inch doesn't want to just bend.
And yeah, it was nuts. And there's a couple different ways of doing it, but the way we did it was, we cut all the stuff, and then we bullnose the edge of it, and then soaked it for, I think it was 3 days, in water with a couple drops of glycerin, and then taking it out, it's like crazy supple, bendy, and it was really nuts. So it takes 2 people to do it, and it was using hide glue, using old brown glue, not hot hide, but old brown glue, because the water didn't affect that, and because you're doing it with the stuff wet. And you're basically sticking it into one end, into the corner or whatever, and then using these big honking rosehead nails. And the nails are huge. And you look in and you're following that curve around, nailing it in to the edge of the skirt the whole way around. And then, that's it. And, you have to do it in some sections. It's not all just continuous. So you have to, wherever there's a miter or something like that, and you miter it just with a chisel.
Do you nail it in place and then cut the miter?
On some of them, we did that, and some of them we could cut the miter. Yeah, you cut the miter and then stick it in.
Okay.
And it was coming into a piece already.
Right.
So the miters, you're just trying to match what was there and jamming it in there. And you kind of have 2 people, because one person's pushing it in and forming it around, and the other person is with the hammer. Drilling it, and then with the nails. And you look in period stuff, and you look at this stuff and goes, my God, those nails are huge. And they are, because that's what's holding the thing in. You couldn't use little sprigs or something like that, because it would just pop out. Yeah. So it was really cool. I'd love to have, I did it on my piece, and overall I'm happy with it, but I sure wish I could get a second chance, that was good practice. Now let me do it again, because there's a couple things that, the projection wasn't quite right or something like that. And it's really hard to get it in and get no gaps and that sort of thing.
So can we go back to the glycerin thing? So you're soaking it for 3 days.
Yeah.
And this is, mind you, 25 minutes after you said, I've never soaked the wood before, Ben. Again.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, but
you're soaking it for 3 days in water and glycerin. Where do you get glycerin?
Drugstore.
What do you use glycerin? Like, what is it?
I think it's used for skin stuff.
Like, what section of the drugs? You're going to skin stuff, or are you just going glycerin?
I'm going to the pharmacist and go, hey, you guys got glycerin. Where would I find it?
Okay.
Yeah. Because we bought some years ago, and I still have some left. It's not something that you use all that often.
Huh. Have you ever heard of glycerin to make wood bendy?
Just from Bob.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well, when we in the classes that we got,
don't you use that for like flattening veneers? You spray it?
Yeah, it's part of the it's part
And
of
then
the
you
veneer
weigh it down.
flattening recipe.
Okay.
That's why we had that. And it's also Randy Wilkinson in the Wood ID classes that we do
Okay.
with Randy.
All right.
We take some water and a little bit of glycerin and put some on the end grain of the samples. And then with a razor blade, we're cutting that end grain with the razor blade. And that way, with a 10X loop, you can see into it pours. It's an incredibly clean cut.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool.
It's perfect for dry skin.
I thought it had something to do with that. Yeah.
Helps moisture bind to skin cells to deeply hydrate. Makes wood bendy.
There you go.
Yeah, it looks available right now, $8.19 at CVS. So there you go. It is a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I still have, I think, 2 jars left. I think Phil Lowe was doing a class, years and years ago, and it's get glycerin. Okay. Absolutely no idea how much glycerin.
Phil told me to get it.
It's like, well, I got 5 gallons. Is that good?
We got a lot left.
That's awesome. Wow. So that's we'll try and you should post a picture of it to your Instagram and I'll link to it.
Yeah.
But it is some impressive wood bending. So
yeah. No, it was really cool. It was fun to do,
Cool.
Yeah. I want to do more. So
Groovy.
yeah.
You want to go?
Oh, sure. It's pretty quick. This is kind of starting to fall under the category of maybe a little crazy, but it has to do with paying attention to grain direction, which is a huge part of woodworking,
Unheard
right?
of.
So like hand planing, joiners and planers, of course, grain direction is really important. Then you find out as you're ripping stock, grain direction is the grain running out as you're ripping it. It cuts a little bit cleaner if it's going in the right direction, and also if you're using your fingers as a feather board to hold the stock against a rip fence as you're ripping. If the grain is going in the right direction, it's smoother instead of catching your fingers. So, it's like grain direction starts to become something that you really can't escape. So we're making these tool chests out of butternut. Butternut is kind of, it's a little bit fuzzy.
Squirrely.
It's a little squirrely, fuzzy before you really plane it down. And so we were laying blue tape across the face of the cases where our through mortise and tenon joiner was going. Lay out through there, call it good, get everything cut, and then you peel off the tape. And it's just like with butternut, sometimes it's like it pulls up these sort of silvery strips of grain and leaves little indents. And it's like, oh, that's really terrible. And then I thought, oh. Then I looked at the edge of the board and it's like, sure enough, you're pulling the tape as the grain is going down. And then it's just like, wait, what if I pull the grain from the other side? And it's just like, oh, that's super clean. So whenever you take tape off wood, you have to pay attention to the grain direction.
I don't know if I'm horrified or just like totally in awe.
The difference was unbelievable.
Yeah. And then Bob, I love Bob because Bob doesn't buy into anything automatically. He's automatically like, nah, what are you talking? No, so what I do is you can't do this, you have to do this. And it started to tear out. He goes, what's that? And I said, try it from the other way. He goes, oh yeah, that.
It was.
Yes, it was a grain direction.
And it was the funniest thing because both of us were like, oh, Jesus, now we got to deal with this.
yeah. This is one, as if life wasn't complicated enough.
One more thing.
Now I'm reading
tape.
the grain before I pull a piece of tape
Yes.
off.
Give me a break.
So,
Yeah.
what you got, Ben?
I have an all-time favorite tool of all time for this week, and it is the Lee Valley 6-inch ruler that is $4.95 and gets you right over the hump into free shipping.
There you go.
And I may have bought 3 to get free shipping the other day, but it felt very justified. I was like, yeah, I could use 3 of these, of course.
Yeah.
It isn't like throwing something you don't need on just to get, even as Bob pulls something similar out of his pocket. Yeah, it is, even if you need to buy 4 of them, you would be,
That's okay.
thanking yourself eventually for buying 4 more of these little rulers.
Do you know how many 6-inch scales I own?
Well, but that's not $5.
No, but they're all but I get it.
Yeah.
Pushing you over the edge on free shipping.
Yeah.
That's the reason that I own one of those Blackwing pencil sharpener things. Is
back around to pencils again.
Yeah, well, that's the only reason I own it was because that kicked me over for free shipping.
Yep.
I certainly didn't need it.
I'm calling that the free shipping ruler. All right. All right, let's okay, this one's juicy. And I went diving into all right, I'm going to read this and then we'll talk about it a little bit. I asked this of another prolific woodworking podcast. And then I went looking for this conversation on the other podcast and couldn't find it. I'm not going to call them out because they might be misrepresented in this question. So my question to them was in regards to something they said, which was sharpening at 80 grit is technically sharp and going further is just for edge retention. If this is true, why do most pros say that you have to have 2 polished surfaces to be sharp? This makes more sense to me, but I have been struggling with it lately, and I've not been woodworking as long as any of you. My other gripe is that the Japanese woodworkers who do a hand plane finish on their boards wouldn't need to do it. I'm pretty certain they would not. And I think I missed this name. I apologize to question asker. So without knowing what the conversation was, can you sharpen with 80 grit? Technically?
No.
Okay.
Yes and no.
All right.
I mean, I get it. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's sharp. It'll do certain things. But I think of it as 2 planes intersecting, and the bigger the scratches are on the surfaces that are intersecting, those scratches, it's kind of like they come together and rather than a perfect line, you've got this ragged line of scratches. And as soon as you put any pressure on those little fingers of steel sticking out, they just break off. So, you don't have a sharp edge anymore. So the less scratches that you have, that means that the intersection is going to be better and you're not going to have these little fingers of steel hanging out.
Yeah.
And you're always going to have some. It's amazing when you start looking at what you thought was a sharp edge and you look under it like what was that? What was the loop that Andrew Hunter gave us last year? Wasn't that 20X
Too
or
strong.
something? It was
Everything looked dull.
Oh my God. It looked like craters.
Except his stuff.
But yeah, so it is edge retention, but
it's also surface quality. Depending on
quality is going to be huge. The difference.
Lawnmower blades probably would be okay.
Exactly. That's what I say. You can cut stuff, but how cleanly did you want to cut it? I mean, you can cut with a card scraper. I know people that raise a burr on a card scraper with a grinder, and so it's going to make a burr that's going to cut, but it's going to be a pretty rough cut.
It's also going to degrade really quickly.
Yeah. It won't. Yeah, that's the other thing. The edge will last longer.
Yeah.
The finer it is.
All right, so let's move back to the surface cut quality, because I think I remember you, Bob, saying one time that the surface on the piece of wood when you're pairing with a chisel is a mirror of the back of the chisel, basically. However smooth and flat that back of the chisel is how smooth and flat that piece will be.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean the test for sharpness is slicing end grain eastern white pine.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can slice a thin shaving of eastern white pine with a sharp chisel or sharp plane iron, and it's completely shiny and there's no white cast to it, then that's sharp.
Well, it's shiny because the back of the chisel.
No, I don't think
It's
so.
a cutting
It's shiny.
edge. There are no scratches. There are no nicks.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think of it, if you picture the end grain of a piece of Eastern white pine, picture it like a bundle of straws.
Yeah.
And you're slicing, if you're slicing with a super, super sharp tool, then none of those straws are being pulled out. So it's shiny because you're just looking into the ends of those straws. As soon as it's a little bit dull, the edge is grabbing the straw and it's pulling it out just a little bit, bending it over, and then slicing it. That's why you get that white cast. That's why if you're like when this afternoon when you were planing the end grain on on the box, planing one way, is it looks beautiful, and then you plane from the other edge, and they never quite come together. And it's not that the surface is off; it's the straws are bending one way, and that's what you're looking at. Now you're coming from the other way, and it looks different because the straws are bending the other way. So, but the white cast that you're seeing is the side of the fiber being pulled out. And if there's like perfect shine, you're just looking into the end of those tubes. That's how I visualize it. Does that make sense to you, Mike?
Yeah. It's like, I mean, you're the former chef, so I don't want to misspeak, but I know tomatoes slice a little easier if there's sort of a little bit of a burr on there. If I'm sharpening my knives on a coarser waterstone or oil stone rather than going to a mere polish. Just that little bit of grab acts a little bit like a serrated edge in that situation.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So, can you speak on edge retention though for you? Like, is it just a matter of you're going to 1200 or 12,000 grit with a Shapton or whatever?
Yeah.
Because as you work, it gets duller and duller to a point where you can't take it anymore.
I mean, one thing I talk about a lot, and we've talked about all week long, is that woodworking is really about controlled stock removal. That's all we're doing. We're taking stuff away from logs into boards, from rough lumber into smooth lumber, into dimension lumber. Then we're cutting notches and holes and grooves and things. And the more controlled we are in that process, the more control we have over the process of making. So that manifests itself in a couple ways. So a chisel, if we're using to fine-tune joinery, the sharper the chisel, the thinner the shaving you can take, and the greater degree of accuracy you can work to. If it's so dull you have to take a 1/16 of an inch shaving just to take a shaving, then that's the degree of accuracy you can work to. And you can go from too tight to too skinny super quick, taking super thick shavings. So for chisels, it's about how much control do I have over fitting. And for hand planes, it's all about leaving a smooth surface without tear out. And tear out is directly related to the thickness of the shaving you're taking. And the thickness of the shaving you're able to take is directly related to how sharp that plane iron is. So if your plane iron is sharp enough to take a shaving a thousandth of an inch thick, then you're able to get tear-out free surfaces in a lot of challenging woods. So I had one of my students said, I can't get my plane working. It's either set too light or too heavy, and I don't know which. And it's because it was a dull blade, meaning it wouldn't cut until it took a heavy shaving.
Okay.
So he was going, not cutting. Oh, that's way too deep. Now I've got tear out. How do I fix that? And it just had to do with, well, let's get you sharp first. Now you've got a little bit better range to work with there. So, and I think being scratch free is a huge part of that. There's no way I can take those shavings sharpening to 80 grit or 1,000 grit or 4,000 grit. I think you need to go to that finest level you can. And even something which is quote unquote super highly polished, yeah, you look at it under a microscope and it looks like a mountain range. I mean, you're still talking a lot of crazy stuff going on there. So even as polished as we can get, it's still far away from dead flat. But as long as we're getting optically flat, meaning, sharp within a micron or so, then visually it looks like a mirror surface, and you're doing pretty good work that way.
The thing with the sharpness is that you have the control, because the sharper it is, the less effort you have to make. You're not pushing as hard, which means that you have as much control. And the same thing with a hand plane. I mean, if you have a beautiful, sharp smoothing plane, you shouldn't be pushing so hard that you're like, oh my God, I'm wiped out. I'm so tired doing this. It should never be like that. Yeah.
And in defense of this notion about you can get sharp, quote unquote, with on 80 grit, I agree from the standpoint of you can establish the geometry of the blade with 80 grit. And then every grit beyond that, just like sanding from 80 grit up to 600 grit, you're just refining the scratch pattern beyond that point. So to that, I would say, technically you can say that is correct. It's sharp, and that you've established the geometry of the two planes meeting without rounded over edges. And then from there, it's refining that scratch pattern. Sure. I would buy that.
Just not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
Or a lawnmower blade.
Or a lawnmower blade. Yeah. Scissors are ground pretty rough, aren't they?
Yeah, but they're also burnished. And the burnishing. Okay. Yeah. Some of the stuff from Mike.
Michelle, he loves sharpening scissors.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's what I learned. And I watched, and he burnishes them, and burnishing gets rid of a lot of those scratches. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This will be a quicker one, I think. And I am missing the name on this question asker as well. I apologize, everyone. I purchased a 1990s era bandsaw from an abandoned shop and rebuilt it for my shop. I have since purchased a total of 6 blades of varying widths and TPI from several different sources. Recently, I broke my first blade during a cut, so I changed the blade and resumed cutting, only to have the second blade break within 5 minutes. At that point, I recognized something was wrong. While mulling over possible causes, I decided to look at the length of these blades. The bandsaw uses a 93.5-inch blade, but I discovered that ordering blades in the past, I'd accidentally ordered 2 93-inch blades. A half-inch difference in the length of the blade probably doesn't seem that important at the time, but on reflection, I realized that difference translates to 1 extra quarter-inch elevation on the upper wheel when tensioning the blade to the preset on the back of the tension spring block. This was leading to significant overtensioning of the 2 93-inch blades. Now that I have seen the error of my ways, I have not experienced any more blade breakage with my collection of 93.5-inch blades. Not really a question, but I thought, and I gave this away to Mike beforehand. Bob, what is the blade length of that bandsaw right there?
158.5, I think it is.
Would you buy a bandsaw blade for that without looking?
Would I do what?
Would you buy 158.5 without looking right now?
Like, are you that confident in that number that you?
I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I bought, and in answer to that question, for years it was 158.5, and then the wood slicer blade that I buy, they stock 158, not 158.5. Okay, that's what I'll buy. And it works fine.
Are you still tensioning with the gauge on the saw?
Yeah. See, I overtension. I've never bought that whole worrying about the tension. I mean, I tension it quite a lot. And, it just, to me, it only makes sense that if you're going to put a piece of wood through a bandsaw blade that's like sort of supported at the top and the bottom, it's got a bow if you don't have it tensioned well. Now, there's people that will argue with that and say, oh, well, the low tension blades and all that stuff. Okay. But I never got into it, never worried about it. I just tighten it. I just tension it and call it good. And I wonder on that one, to me, that strikes me as a bandsaw blade quality issue. You know, if he's breaking blades just from tensioning it a little bit more than the guide says, because those guides are, you know, they're not very accurate anyway, and it's not something I ever worried about.
What about you, Mike? Do you tension with the?
You know, back in the day, the over tensioning, like super over tensioning, was in vogue, where you would even buy the extra heavy yellow springs for your Delta 14-inch bandsaw, and there was like so much tension on there that then there was a big market for the big levers on the back of the saw to relieve the tension when the saw is not in use, so you're not gouging your wheels out for having that blade just digging into there. So now almost every new bandsaw has that little tension release lever, which is good for changing blades, but I never detension my bandsaw blade like in between using it.
My first bandsaw that I had was a Delta 14-inch, and I'll never forget. You know, and it said, "Oh, make sure you release the tension when you're done." Yeah, and I'll never forget. It was like I woke up at 2:00 in the morning and goes, "Oh no." And I ran down my shop and undid it. And I was like, yeah, that's the last time I ever lowered the tension on it. I was like, that's ludicrous. You know, I think that whole tensioning, you know, it's kind of, to me, it's like, you know, your car develops a flat spot on the bottom of the tire. So you should move it every 20 minutes so that you don't get a flat spot.
You just jack it up to take the weight off the tires when you're not using it. Yeah.
I had always heard that, like, if you are, you know, a hobbyist who uses their bandsaw once every 4 months or something, it might be worth it.
Yeah.
And I agree with that notion, maybe. But
I'm like, if the little pointer, you know, 1/2-inch blade, little pointer goes to 1/2 inch, kick it up a little bit higher.
Okay.
I always do that.
Just a bit. Yeah. And when I got my new big 17-inch bandsaw with the lever release thing, I had a little Post-it note that I put over the on switch that said, check, you know, blade tension before you turn the machine on. Cause like me, it's like, yeah, it's down tension. You turn it on and it's like, that's, so there. I think that Post-it is still there, and I still have never detensioned the blade other than, changing blades, which is nice.
I don't like that lever for changing blades.
You just come all the way down.
Yeah, I find that like really irritating.
Well, it's not enough to get the blade off. It's just
and
mine
is it
really? Yeah, mine.
The one that other one there, I don't like it because it's. I feel like I'm lowering the tension with no control. Yeah. So all of a sudden, where I was just kind of getting it far enough that I could just pull the blade off, and I was loosening it, and then with that lever, I was like, you know, now it's like completely off, and now I got to start from scratch. So I just find it irritating as hell.
Okay,
and unnecessary.
Poor Bob has to just deal with so many things that are irritating as hell around him.
Well, yeah, well, you know,
everything is irritating. Maybe,
you know, Beckford did a post a couple weeks ago, and he said something about being a curmudgeon, and I was like, Chris, you ain't seen nothing.
I don't know. I don't want to be around during that competition. That's all I'm saying. How to be
a curmudgeon.
I don't want any part of that. Okay, so we had a question from, and this is going to elicit to, we had a question in the Discord. Yeah, there we go.
What's a Discord?
Discord's basically a running chat. It's like it's like a text conversation of woodworking buddies.
Oh God. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, I know. That's why I didn't tell anyone about it. It's just for the listeners. Well, not you. I mean, whatever. But somebody was just on there asking about shoulder or oh my goodness, rabbet planes. Thank you. And which size rabbet plane should they be getting? And I had just jumped on and said probably get the large so that you can do tenons with it, or you can do a lot more with it. But then their question was, what's the downside? Can I work on smaller boxes with the large rabbet plane? Rabbet plane. Why am I having a hard time with this?
Well,
shoulder plane.
A shoulder plane. A rabbet plane is different.
Yes,
a shoulder
plane.
A shoulder plane is. I think that's what we're talking
about. I can't believe Ben doesn't know the difference between a rabbet plane and a shoulder plane.
Yeah.
Woodworking podcast.
Cutting gauges and marking gauges.
I'm not going there with you.
Yeah, I'm not going there either.
I'm not going there with you.
Mike and I went there yesterday.
We went there. I'm not going back.
My first shoulder plane was the Record. Was it the 73, the big one that the large Lee Nielsen is based on? That was my first shoulder plane, and I have it, and I use it once in a while for certain things because it's big enough for certain, I look at it as it's too big for everyday use.
Okay.
And personally, I like the Clifton 3, I don't even know the numbers. I could get it if you.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. But it's nice because the width of it is about 7/8 of an inch. The blade, the iron's about 7/8 of an inch, and it fits in your hand really, really well.
It still has some nice mass to it.
Yeah, and which is really important. I think the large Lee Nielsen or that large the Record that I had is really good for certain things, but it's to me it's kind of like driving a 18-wheeler around town.
Yeah.
Okay.
It works, but who wants to work that hard?
Yeah. My first shoulder plane, I was looking at the Stanleys, and the big one looked too big, so I got the 92.
Yeah.
Which is 1/2 inch, 5/8 something.
No, that's around 3/4, I think.
No, it's smaller than that.
Yeah, that was always my favorite. One of mine too.
It just, to me, it just didn't have the mass. It kind of chattered if it took a little bit too heavy of a shaving, and I ended up getting the Lee Nielsen Buick, the big guy, which looked super scary, but again, the mass, it just drove through the cut so cleanly and so smoothly. And yeah, for a little tiny, cleaning up the little tiny rabbet around a box lid, it's a little bit too much for that. So then I also picked up a medium Veritas shoulder plane. I do like that. And then because I teach a box making class where we do this little rabbet around the lid, then I bought the the small Lee Nielsen, because they may even have a smaller brass one with a little wedge in it.
I have that. I made that as a kit 100 years ago.
So, but just the smaller steel body Lee Nielsen shoulder plane, which is really tiny. And that's good for like little tiny stuff. And it's super cool to pull out, and you do this and the students say, wow. What's that? So
and that's really what it's about.
Yeah. People typically say, which one should I get? The idea being the big ones look super big and scary, maybe a smaller one. I tend to recommend getting a big one. And I really recommend if they can try out different sizes before they buy it. That's nice.
Because for you, the way that you use it, it's more about the width of the blade than anything, right?
I'm often using it to trim tenons, which technically that's not a shoulder plane. You'd use a rabbet plane. But I do trim tenons with a shoulder plane. And the wider blade, if I can trim a tenon in a single pass, it means less chance that tenon is going to go out of parallel with the stock. Or if I have a narrower piece, I'm having to take a couple passes across it, things can get a little bit squirrely, easier.
What are you using to fit tenons?
I use the small Lee Nielsen shoulder plane, the 041, or the Clifton. which is bigger, but it's not as big as the large Lee Nielsen. And I recommend my students. I recommend usually the 041, the small Lee Nielsen, because it's really versatile. I agree that a larger tenon, you have to take a couple passes and you have to do that controlled. And I show them a trick to do that with a pencil so that you can see what you're doing. But yeah, and it's readily accessible. But my favorite one is that Clifton one.
I'm looking in your tool cabinet right now, and I think I see 4.
1, 2, 3. Yeah.
And then next to the cutting gauge. For those audio only, he's walking over and
3110. That's it.
The
Clifton 3110.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice and wide, but stout, but small.
Well,
still.
It fits in your hand perfectly. That's what I like about it. That's what I don't like about the large Record or the large Lee Nielsen. I mean, they're excellent planes, but I can't wrap my hand around it as easily. And that one I can. I don't have huge hands, so
it's kind of Goldilocks plane there.
It is that.
But for fitting tenons, really good plane. I learned this from Will Knepp too. Is to get a rabbit plane, like a Stanley 78 or something like that. It's a two-handed plane, so the trick is that rather than holding the stock against a bench hook or something, in that you really have to clamp it in the vise and use that. And you can buy rabbit planes for $30 or $40 at flea markets, and you can hardly ever find shoulder planes. I had a bunch because I just couldn't pass them up, and then I realized, no, they're all this cheap, and you can find them a lot. So just stop buying them. And I've given a number of them away to people. But they're super cool. They're inexpensive. They have a really open throat, and it's like, oh my gosh, how's this going to take a clean shaving? But when you're pairing a tenon, you're going across the grain anyway, so it's not a big deal.
A little bit finicky to set the depth adjustment
You're not going to get as fine a cut as you will like with that Clifton or the Lee Nielsen,
or the as fine of control with it, because it's got that weird thumb lever for the depth.
You guys are like, no, you can get there.
But it's like I
don't know about you, but I can do it.
I was telling Mike the other day. I mean, I was doing tapered. I had to adjust the drawer runners on that William and Mary high chest, and I had to taper the portion of the runner that the drawer was actually going to fit on, so that the drawer would
the face would sit.
The face would sit. Would sit.
Okay.
Flush, and I did it with that rabbit plane with the fence, and it was really cool, because it was like, okay, this is perfect for this, and it was such a cool technique that I did, and it was one of those, just keep that in your back pocket, because it was really good. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Again, head on over to finewoodworking.com/fundamentals and get going on your woodworking journey. We really think you're going to get a lot from it and enjoy it. And heck, at the very least, it's a discounted 3-month unlimited membership. If you enjoyed this episode, click that thumbs up on YouTube, leave a nice comment. If you really like this episode, head on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review and a really nice comment. And make sure to check out our Discord, updated link below. Links discussed in the show will be available at shoptalklive.com. We'll see you in 2 weeks with another episode. Have a good one.
Harold was on the back cover with those pieces he was making. I want to say 162, but I don't think that's right.
So you got to come to the open house.